start things off. So yeah, a little introduction to myself and obviously the live series. So this is our live series roundtable event. Today we're going to be speaking around the challenges faced with remote working within the US. Yeah, a little bit about myself. Obviously, I specialise in recruiting Rust engineers here at Amicus, and I'll go around each of the guests of the panelists today. You can give yourselves a brief intro and what you do and where you're from, etc., and we can go from there. So yeah, I don't know if you want to start, Greg.
Sure. My name is Greg Dick. I am an engineering director at Huddle. We are headquartered in Lincoln, Nebraska. That's where I'm from, Lincoln, Nebraska. So I've been with Huddle for 9.5 years. We focus in the sports industry. Our motto is, make every moment in sports count. And so I have a lot of experience both managing individuals in the office and managing remote people. We've got a lot of distributed teams all over the US and in other countries.
Brilliant. Yeah, Michaela, do you want to give us a brief introduction to yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Michaela Negus. You're also welcome to call me Mickey, my nickname. I'm based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm an engineering manager at EdgeNode. We're a core developer of the graph, which is the core indexing and querying layer for Web3 applications. I've been here for about a year. We're fully remote. I manage a team across 9 time zones around the world. And before that, I spent 10 years at a local laboratory where I worked fully on site. So I've lived in both worlds as well.
Brilliant. And yeah, finally with you, Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy Knieriem. I'm Director of Engineering for ConnectWise. Been here for less than a year, but this is my second time with ConnectWise. I was here previously for close to 5 years. I've managed teams in office, remote, like Michaela said, multiple time zones throughout the world, which is awfully a fun challenge to get into. And yeah, it's a different world these days, and it's that's kind of where we're at.
Exactly, especially after COVID as well. Obviously, a lot more workforces nowadays and workplaces work on a remote basis. So I kind of wanted to start the podcast off. I know you've all got questions to put to each other, but I wanted to start off with you all maybe giving a little brief introduction into how you started out with remote working and kind of what was your first experiences of working remotely. So yeah, I don't know if you'd like to go in the same order with you going first, Greg.
Yeah, so my first experience with other workers being remote was probably around 2015 when we acquired a company in London, and suddenly we found ourselves with these engineers in London, different time zone, and we experimented with a lot of different ways. How do we try to get them as engaged as these other employees that were in office? And it was very challenging. We tried a lot of fun things, like we would give them a camera in their office and have them up on a TV at all times, and that kind of petered out after a little while. And then for myself working remote, my first experience was actually really just during COVID. I obviously work from home from time to time, but in terms of focusing on being a remote worker, that really didn't happen until COVID, and that was kind of the same for a lot of my team as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, same for you, Michaela.
Yeah, I think my first kind of deep dive into working with people who are stationed around the world, I think that's kind of everyone's first entry maybe into pre-remote work, but distributed workforce. I was a skill set manager for a counterterrorism ops team when I worked at the government lab. And so I was stationed here in Albuquerque, but when we were responding to a terrorist event, people would be around the world wherever a suspect device was discovered. And so we had to have, high op tempo conversations with people stationed around the world over, different networks. So that was kind of the first time I had to coordinate across different time zones around the world. And then when COVID hit, I was still working pretty much on site, doing a lot of classified work. So couldn't really do a whole lot from home. And then when I came to EdgeNode, we were fully remote. We have a co-creation, co-working space in San Francisco for any Web3 developers who want to hang out at an amazing office space, but it's not like an actual hub. It's not a central office hub the way things work in Web2. So yeah, fully remote company, 65 employees living in pretty much every time zone around the world. So a lot of asynchronous work these days.
All right. Well, for me, my first jaunt into working with remote teams was some American Express, some outsourced testing to India, which was interesting just to get to that whole time zone. That was the introduction to like people not in the office. And then sometime right after there, I started working remotely, and it was kind of a flip because I worked remotely, but the company was all in the office, which was even harder for me to get into because they weren't set up for remote work at all. So it didn't really work out. And then finally, I got into Malwarebytes in 2016, and there was people in different countries, different time zones in the U.S., and really diving into dealing with that. And I was, I was in the office. There was remote people. There was multiple offices, which is another like remote thing that we have to deal with these days, is from many different offices working together, and it becomes just a challenge just to have a meeting. It was the first time I learned that pain of having that multi-time zone meeting, and then getting pinged after hours because I was in the East Coast and another office is in the West Coast. So I was doing development work at the time, and then I would put my work in, and then at like 8 p.m. my time, the testing team was getting ready to finish their day, and they pinged me with questions about how things are working. It was always an interesting thing to try to be open to the time zones to accommodate this remote workforce idea.
Yeah, it can be very difficult with the time zones and stuff. I kind of experience it myself in the recruitment world at the minute with obviously being based in Manchester and recruiting within the US. So yeah, completely understand that with the time differences. So yeah, obviously as I mentioned to you all, I asked you to all obviously prepare a question for each other, and then obviously let you guys discuss it. So obviously we'll jump straight into that. Yeah, like I said, we'll go in the same order, and if you guys want to obviously discuss with each other, and yeah, I'll let Greg take us away and start us off with what he wants to put to everyone.
Yeah. So my first question is around team building. What works for team building with remote employees? This feels like something that should have gotten figured out really well during COVID because everybody was kind of forced into it, and yet I still don't have a good answer. A lot of the things that we've tried, they either feel really forced, or you get the people that would benefit the most from some engagement don't feel like engaging in those things. So I'm curious to hear from you two if you came up with any good solutions.
I've gone through a couple different ways and tacks at it, and it all comes down to how much people want to be involved with it. It has to be a want, because I've set up like social times during the day, after hours. I've set up games to play, even the icebreaker type games, trivia games about each other, like weird facts that you wouldn't know, and people had to guess who it was. And the other things is that adding a 5 to 10 minutes pre-time on a meeting to force, this is not the meeting, this is you guys just got in the room, you have your coffee and you're waiting to start the meeting. This is that social engagement that you would have in the office. All of those work just as well as the people want them to work. And that's where you say you're pushing, it comes and it goes with that. Am I frozen?
Yeah, I think well, you're frozen on my screen. I'm not sure about for everyone else.
Okay. Okay. At least you can hear me at least.
Oh, I can see you again now.
There it goes. But it all comes into how much the team wants to. You can set up all these engagements. I've even had one company had like the donut talks, or it's an app inside of like Slack that randomly selects peoples and topics and says go, and you have to, it gets scheduled for you. You get like 30 minutes with random people in the company to do it too. So there's a lot of tools out there. It's just a matter how much your team wants to be engaged.
Yeah, big +1 on that. So we use Donut as well, which is pretty fun. I think if we were all in the office, there's still some people who wouldn't want to do team building activities or go to a happy hour in person, and most likely behave the same way. It's just not their style. It's not of interest to them. You can't force that, and you shouldn't try. But I do, agree with a lot of the tactics that Andy proposed. I also will say, I think there's something to be said for getting people together. We do retreats in person once a year. We send people to hackathons or to conference events. We have a budget set aside for that. So people still get to network in person with their coworkers and then build a network with other people at these events. So I don't think we can really do away with that fully, or replace it, like all for everyone working remotely. But I think at some point it does really help with team bonding and culture building to bring folks together.
That's definitely true. I've seen lots of events where you bring the people together. It bonds them much better than the 30 minutes, an hour here or there you can get, because you have that extended time period. You have those conversations over coffee, and people are out of their element and they're forced into like a social situation so they can do it. So I do definitely agree with that. That's definitely a big benefit if your company is on board with the funding of that.
Brilliant. Yeah, is there any other questions you've got, Greg, that you wanna put forward, or no?
Well, I've got more questions, but I'll let one of the others take a turn.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll go back round again after then. So yeah, Mickey, if you wanna ask away.
Sure. That was actually the first question I had written down. So definitely a good one. I think, there's some unique benefits, obviously, to working remotely. Have you gained efficiencies that, like in a remote work environment, that you haven't seen in an on-site office environment? And then what are some of the inefficiencies you guys have dealt with that you've maybe had to overcome?
It's really interesting. I don't know that I've thought about efficiencies gained. I think this is kind of an efficiency gain, but I didn't necessarily like it, that when people first started remote working during COVID, they were more likely to respond to things after hours. I didn't like it because I wanted everybody to, still have that barrier between their work life and their home life. Because when they were in an office and then they go home, it's this big transition. But when they're at home all day and probably on the same computer between work and whatever they're choosing in the evening, they were responding more. So that's kind of an efficiency gained. There's probably other good ones that I'm not thinking about. But in terms of efficiency lost, I think the biggest one that I've seen is there's a bigger level of friction in asking for collaboration. So as an example, if I'm sitting next to a person in the office and I'm running into some weird build issue, I can just tap them on the shoulder. If I think they know the answer, I can tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, can you look at this? I don't know what's going on. And it's a very quick interaction, usually, if they know the answer, and I can get past it. So the time to resolution is like a minute. But in that remote environment, I don't know what that person's doing right now. I don't know if they're in a mode where I can, tap them on the shoulder. So I might feel like I need to gather all of this information, all this context for them, and send it to them in a Slack, and then, or even say like, hey, whenever you have a free moment, can I get a minute of your time, and maybe we can hop on a Zoom and work through this. And it might be 15 minutes, half an hour before we even get started on it, so that the time to resolution on those little things, it can feel very nuanced, but I think that those can add up over time.
Yeah, I was going to mention that but it's both an efficiency and an inefficiency, because that barrier to interruption of another person is there now with remote. So you have more focused time, less likely someone's going to go tap on you on the shoulder. There's not noises around you. There's not that ambient things, unless you bring it into your own home to do it. But you got that time where you're not being interrupted. You can schedule your own time and do things. Again, it would be easier sometimes just to grab people and go into a conference room. We got an issue, and we throw it on the whiteboard real fast, have a quick 15-minute collab session. And like you said, that makes the results come so much faster. It's trying to figure out a balance of the openness of the team members to do that virtually with remote employees and remote work versus that focus time. We had to find a balance in between, because when you're in person, you can kind of see if someone's like in it and you don't want to go talk, you don't want to necessarily interrupt them. But sometimes you do it anyways, or people just aren't as aware of what people are doing and how focused they are. So it's kind of double-edged with that. You get both inefficiencies and efficiencies from that focus time and that barrier. But it's hard. I don't know if you guys, I wasn't going to ask that, but I'm not sure if anyone has any ideas how to meet that balance in the middle of doing that collaborative session versus not interrupting people, because you don't want it to wait always, but sometimes it needs to wait.
Yeah, I think for me, and I'm not, if all of your team members are in the US, maybe it's not as big of a struggle, but for me, I really only have 2 or 3 hours a day where everyone's working, because we're so distributed. So I would say that's forced us to only have meetings really with each other for 3 hours of the workday, which means you get all of your questions answered. If you're in Europe, Africa, Asia, you get your questions answered at the end of your workday. So you're set up for your morning. And then my US team members, North and South America, we get all of our questions answered in our morning. And then the rest of our day is protected from meetings because no one else is online. And then I think having like a specified, like, hey, have all of your meetings in this block of time and then don't in the other block, unless there's a good reason to break that rule, I think has been pretty great.
Yeah, we have similar with a lot of overlap with India at my current job. And the other thing is we've also implemented kind of a meetingless Wednesday, or a barrier to having meetings on a specific day of the week to encourage that focus time, so that people are like, all right, we can sacrifice one day of the week to not having a bunch of meetings to keep that focus time, keep people going. So we have something, but it was just, I'm not sure how to make it easier for collaboration, because I do want to see pair programming and whiteboarding happening with remote, and that's the hardest part.
One of the things we started doing when COVID hit and we were experimenting with many different things was we call them working agreements and user manuals. Where basically, we had a meeting to talk about how each individual likes to work, how they prefer to work. And one of the important things that came out of that was setting expectations for a lot of the younger developers, that, hey, these are the really good times to, or good situations to ping one of the more senior developers to ask for help. And setting that expectation made them feel more comfortable doing it, hitting them up over Slack. Whereas before, they very often thought, oh, that person's too busy, I don't want to bug them. And so just making it clear when it's okay helped quite a bit.
I like that a lot. We took a different approach, but I see huge merit in doing it that way. We're trying to drive conversations out of people's DMs and into more of the public chats in Slack. Because if someone's offline, you're not just stuck, or that chat hasn't died in a DM, like someone else who does come online who has knowledge can answer quicker. But I like the approach you described.
Yeah, that's good. And one of my teams does a very interesting thing. They have like a daily set aside, like just like a talking hour, where you can jump in if you need to talk and talk about certain things and ask questions, like an open forum time. And then it's not mandatory. You can jump in if you want to. You don't have to stay the whole time. It's more of like, this is hours. We're open for discussions. Please come over and do your time this time. And it helps some, but again, it all depends on the team and how they use it. And all these tools are out there. It's just hard to find the team to really push them into the right way of doing it.
Brilliant. Yeah, lots of good ideas thrown out there. Yeah, like I said, we'll move on to Andy. I'm sure you've got a question you want to put to everyone.
Yeah, and mine's similar but a little bit different. It's building the relationships and trust between people not in the same team, like the cross-org, cross-team boundaries. I feel like with remote workers, often we're getting into like this Scrum team talks to each other, and that Scrum team talks to themselves, but the two teams don't really talk to each other. There's not as good a forum to like have those discussions that you would have in kitchen, snacks, other kinds of things. But I was curious if Greg or Mickey, if you guys have like some ideas on how you build the relationships outside of the Scrum team.
So that's a really good one. And it's something that I've thought a lot about too, because I have a lot of relationships with people in my office that I don't normally work with. And sometimes those come in really handy when we do need to work with that group. And I know this person really well. And I have experienced that where somebody that's not in the office, suddenly we need to start working with them. I don't know anything about this person. They don't know anything about me. And it can just feel like there's a little bit more friction in figuring out how we're going to work together. To be honest, I haven't seen anything really great. Andy, you actually mentioned the whole, if we have a meeting and we say the first 5 to 10 minutes, we're actually not talking about the meeting. We're talking about other things. I've seen that work pretty well sometimes. And so we have some meetings that even though it says they start at this time, maybe some people will hop on a few minutes early and get some chit chat in. And that seems to help, but it's still usually people that you're working with in some way. We early on in COVID, we also tried, it was like having lunch with random coworkers, but engagement was pretty low because it's kind of awkward to like eat lunch on a Zoom call with people that you don't know. So the idea was, I thought it had a lot of merit, but didn't get a lot of interest. So I'm curious. I'm sure Mickey's going to have the best answer here.
I don't know, but one thing we've been trying is having an engineering demo day. And so it's monthly currently, and we sign speakers up. They're not wasting loads of cycles putting together polished slide decks. The intent is for these feature teams to demo what they're working on, show how it works, and kind of crowdsource feedback from the other engineering teams. And so that also has the knock-on effect of then people learn what these other teams are working on and then feel more comfortable reaching out to them. So just one minor success. That's a hard challenge that I don't think anyone's found really the silver bullet for that.
Yeah, I was hoping because it would help a lot for teams and orgs to get together and talk to each other and like share. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
I will say one thing that I discovered not too long ago was I've only used Slack. I've never used Microsoft Teams. And somebody told me that in Teams, channels are private by default. And so it creates a company culture of I'm only in the channels that I need to be in. And so they end up usually being channels with only the people you work directly with. But in Slack, at least at my company, we have a lot of public channels that are for fun. And when you have a few key people that are driving conversations in those channels and they're getting engagement that way, I've seen some of those relationships get built up pretty well through that. But it works much better when people have a real profile picture. So when you see this person in real life, you're like, oh, yes, you're that person from that Slack channel. I remember you. We talked about these things. So it works okay.
Yeah, I've seen those social channels at a previous company, and it helps. The only problem is, like you said, moderate, someone to actually drive a conversation in it. A lot of times it gets a little stagnant. And then having so many of them, it gets a little too diverse and you don't get the impact you're looking for. But it is a good tool. I should remember that one to try to get some more people involved.
Brilliant. And yeah, like I said, if people have more questions, obviously we can go back around the panel and back to you, Greg, if you've got something else you want to put forward. Yeah,
so I've got another one here. I have not experienced this, but I've talked to other people who have. When you have somebody, especially if it's somebody that you're managing that is remote and they don't want to turn their camera on, you obviously don't want to force them to turn their camera on, but at the same time, you recognize that maybe they're not engaging with the team or the team is having trouble engaging with them. And for me, I would worry that this person only sees this job as a paycheck, and it could be a retention problem further down the road. What kind of strategy do you do to try to get that person to engage a little bit more?
And I have someone on my team who does not enjoy turning his camera on. We took a personality test and he scored on the bar where it shows like how introverted or extroverted you are. He was 100% introverted. And so for me, it helped me realize, like, I think it's just a signal of his introversion and his level of comfort even showing his face. I think in crypto, a lot of people are anon online and they like, even at a company, don't want to show themselves. Or some people go by a pseudonym even at work. And so I think it can be a signal of a retention issue, but I think it could also be an indication of just someone being introverted and that's their default. I would just think, like, if my strategy is just to ask why, like, hey, I've noticed your camera's off. Like, are you not feeling well? Do you not like having your camera on? Like, help me understand. And then often there's some kind of reason why, and some of those reasons you can work through.
Yeah, and the other thing is peer pressure works a lot of times. If you like start off with I encourage everybody to turn on their cameras to do it, and if you have like 9 out of 10 people on a call with their camera on, usually the other one will begrudgingly come across. Peer pressure is really great for some of these kinds of things, but to Mickey's point, yeah, some people are to the point where that's hard for them, and they like working remotely because they don't have to engage as much with the persons and deal with that because it provides extra stress and extra energy depletion for them. So there's understanding, and I've worked in a security company as well, and there are like security researchers that are, you don't know their real names. They're just known by handles and they will not turn their camera on. And there's a reason behind that. And no one's going to break that because these people are legitimately doing stuff that could get them in trouble. So with security researchers, so it's good to do that to understand the why. I agree with that part. But my biggest one is just set up the culture and let peer pressure work. And if it doesn't, see if the communication is an actual problem. If they're not engaging, then you can talk about textual engagement, other ways, other forms of engagement to push them forward into being a great member of the team, because you're just looking for teamwork and value for it.
100% agree. Yeah, the person on my team who keeps his camera off, like, he's an amazing employee. He gives his best work. So I'm like, all right, if you do your best work with your camera off, like, I'm not going to fight that. But you could also try to maybe meet them in the middle, like let them leave their camera off, but ask them to turn their camera on when they're speaking. Then they can turn it back off again. So there could be some like middle ground too that makes you happy and makes them comfortable.
Brilliant. And yeah, Michaela, Mickey, sorry, I don't know if you've got another thing you want to put forward or not. It's fine if not.
That I didn't have another one. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fine. And anything else from you, Andy?
Yeah, I had one more. I was going to just take a poll with you guys. I'm just trying to do the debate of like, do you find it better to have teams that have multi-time zone coverage on their service, or is it better to have teams and like time zone adjacent teams where they can talk to each other more? Which one? Because I've heard like pros and cons for both, and I'm leaning towards like having teams in adjacent time zones where there's like a 5+ hour overlap versus 1 to 2 hour overlap. Or I'm just kind of curious what your opinions are on like that approach, or if the having multi-time zone coverage for services is better in your mind.
So about 5 years ago, we made a big shuffle on our product team to align by time zones. And I've grown to like it, but it's less about the day-to-day work and more about how easy it is to get the teams together for all the stuff Mickey talked about earlier, because it just takes less budget to get the team together. I have seen some of the benefits when you do have the widely distributed team and you have a service where people have pager duty or they need to be on call. There's a lot of benefits to that. And so that's something that we've had to just deal with, that we don't have that, because everybody on my team is in one of 2 time zones. But then I've also seen some teams in the past, and this is kind of the reason we did this big shuffle, where they might have 2 members of the Scrum team in the US and 2 in the UK. And, they only get that little time of overlap every day. And if the team was set up poorly, say you had 2 very junior devs on one side and 2 very senior devs on the other side, you get a lot of times where those junior devs end up spinning their wheels because the senior devs aren't available to help them out with that kind of stuff. And so that was probably the biggest driver of our shuffle. And we've stuck pretty closely to that. We still collaborate across these time zones, across teams, but the teams themselves are usually aligned. I think I still lean that way.
I think you summarized that perfectly. I manage a lot of people with ops responsibilities, like site reliability engineering and our cloud security data pipeline stuff. So for them, I think it's nice to have global coverage, because if our systems go down, I would love for someone just to be naturally awake and working instead of having to wake them up in the middle of the night. I recently absorbed tech support as well. And so hiring my new role, my one tech support engineer right now is in Nigeria. The role I'm hiring for, I would love to cover the US time zones, just to provide better global coverage, so we're not so heavy on the other side of the world. But I think for, non-ops roles, it does make more sense to have folks co-located. And I love the point that Greg made. If you have a senior dev that you can pair up with a junior dev, that does tend to be way better for unblocking the junior devs, so they aren't sitting there for hours and hours waiting for the senior folks to wake up.
And thanks to you both. It's good information to throw in my mix.
Brilliant. Yeah. So, obviously great questions put forward so far. I don't know if anyone else has anything else that they'd like to ask or share. No?
No, I'm all good.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I appreciate you all obviously taking time out your day to jump on the roundtables today. A lot of great insights were shared, and like I said, it was great to have you all on. Obviously, everyone's links will be attached to the YouTube video in case anyone wants to reach out regarding specific issues they're facing. But yeah, appreciate you all taking time out your day to jump on, and thanks a lot for your time.
Awesome. Thanks. Good to
All
meet
right.
you guys.
Yeah,
Great.
thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.